we are joined via Zoom by Pilasande Mkuzo, an attorney at Equal Education Law Centre, to weigh in on the matter. Pilasande, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with us here on the SABC.
Afternoon, Hazel. It's nice to be here.
Perhaps, we could speak to the concerns that have arisen, the growing trend of such kinds of behavior that have been reported in some schools across the country. What are the legal implications regarding the matter as we speak?
I mean, from a general perspective, just generally outside the school, a child below the age of 16 cannot consent to sex with a person who's over the age of 16. That, in terms of our law, constitutes statutory rape, right? And then in the instances of educators or teachers, as you are prohibited from having relationships with learners regardless of the age difference between the teacher and the learner. One would try and justify and say that, no, the learner is in grade 12, they're 18 years of age, and therefore, even in those instances, those relationships are not allowed. When a teacher enters a sexual relationship with a learner, regardless of the learner's consent, the teacher is committing an offense of sexual abuse, because we need to be mindful of the power and the position that the educator holds, and the fact that within the school environment, the role of an educator is that of a custodian when the learner is at school.
Now, absolutely. The educators are obviously in loco parentis at that point at school, and you spoke about the power dynamics. I wonder, in the case that I'd had at Bonkolo Senior Secondary School, why it took so long for the department to react when the allegations surfaced? What is the role of the Department of Education ensuring that teachers, obviously adhere to the rules and regulations based on what you've just echoed now as well?
Just generally, everyone has a responsibility. At the point where someone knows or suspects that a learner has been sexually harassed, has been raped, or a victim of any form of sexual violence, they have a legal duty to report that and have a legal responsibility to do follow-ups and make sure that case is handled with the utmost sensitivity and urgency that the case deserves. In the case of the department not taking its time with attending to the matter is quite problematic, given that they have an entire policy in terms of how these matters should be handled, and quite frankly, a legal obligation to ensure that these matters are attended to, right? There's the Children's Act that gives us a guide in terms of what needs to happen. As far as your question is concerned in terms of what role the DBE has in playing and ensuring that educators are sensitized about this, one would go back in terms of what happens in the curriculum. At the point where teachers have been trained in their tertiary institutions, surely there should be a class around ethics and what the law says, that when you go out into the professional environment, what standards are expected of you. When educators are then given their certificate and enrolled with the South African Council of Educators, there's a code of conduct and a code of ethics that is binding on them, and they should be familiar and abiding in terms of that conduct and ethic.
Well, speaking of the codes of conduct and ethics, is there enough recourse to such cases, just given the fact that there seems to be an increase in these cases coming to the fore?
Interesting question, Liesel. There are quite a number of avenues that are available. As I've mentioned, when an educator formally comes into the professional space, they get enrolled with the South African Council of Educators, which is a professional legal body. And in instances such as these, the parent of the learner, as part of the recourse, is lodging a complaint with SABC. SABC then has a responsibility to do an investigation, and upon the finalization of that investigation, whether the educator is guilty or not, impose a necessary sanction, as it were, be it a fine or the striking off of the particular educator. Simultaneously, the parent or the learner can open a case with the South African Police Services, and that route would take its normal course in terms of opening a case, investigating the matter, and if the investigation does proceed, there'll obviously be a court hearing, which would then lead to a conviction or not. With that being said as well, educators are bound by the Employment of Educator Act, which then gives the Education Labor Relations Council jurisdiction to receive matters or receive complaints from learners and parents, mandating them to investigate and impose sanctions on this. Sometimes all these platforms are platforms that one cannot easily access, and therefore you've got resources such as the Equal Education Law Center that one can reach out to in order to assist and facilitate reaching out and getting assistance from these different platforms that I've mentioned.
Absolutely. I think perhaps also we can look at the psychosocial support that's available for both parents and learners, and what avenues are available for parents navigating these uncharted waters, particularly if they're not aware of their rights or where to from here. How would you also weigh in on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we've got a linear pregnancy policy that the DBE came out with, and one of the points that come out from that particular policy is support and counseling, not just for the learner, but also their family environment. And it puts at the forefront the prioritization and ensuring that the learner is adequately supported within the school environment and made to feel safe within the school environment, and made to make sure that when such cases are brought to the fore, that swift justice takes place.
Pilasande, thank you for your time with us here on the SABC and for joining us, weighing in on that conversation. Pilasande Mkuzo, an attorney at Equal Education Law Center. Again, just weighing in the back of the disturbing news coming out, the assault of teenagers at the Bonkolo Senior Secondary School, of course, where we heard that learners had been impregnated by teachers. At this point, two teachers and principal have been placed on precautionary suspension as the investigation continues. We will continue to monitor that story as it unfolds.